Hello, my friends, and thank you very much, John, for this wonderful welcome this evening. It is indeed a privilege and very humbling to be able to represent the pro-life movement here at this convention over this wonderful Eucharistic weekend. I want to thank John and Beth and all of their faithful volunteers who for 19 years now have worked diligently volunteering and preparing for these amazing events. Every single year is very, very successful, and many of our hearts are touched and certainly our souls are renewed. Tonight I'm going to speak to you on the work of Family Life International in New Zealand, specifically the John Paul II Centres for Life. I'll briefly outline some of the threats that our families and young people are exposed to, but then I will move on to celebrate the stories of hope and joy of our centre here in Auckland. Blessed John Paul II's encyclical Evangelium Vitae and his letter to families specifically, and more generally Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae, the work of family life is built on the very strong foundation of the gospel of life. Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Saint Gianna Barrettomola, and His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI provide the building blocks of a culture of life, firmly built on the foundations of Blessed John Paul II and his predecessors. For 20 years, FLI has faithfully served New Zealand, and in particular the Auckland Diocese, saving babies, giving love and hope to many, many mothers, giving them direction in their lives, oftentimes their dads and families as well. But Blessed John Paul II taught us that life, especially human life, belongs to God. Whoever attacks human life attacks God's very self. So breaking through all the barriers of individual personal states in life, their living conditions, belief systems, etc., FLI reaches out to all girls and women facing a crisis pregnancy. We offer them every possible help in order that they may choose life for their baby in utero. Pope Benedict XVI tells us, God's love does not differentiate between the newly conceived infant still in his or her mother's womb and the child or young person, or the adult and the elderly person. God does not distinguish between any of these because he sees in each one of us an impression of his own image. This comes from Genesis 1:26. And life also is the first good received from God and is fundamental to all others. To guarantee the right to life for all and in an equal manner for all is the duty upon which the future of humanity depends. And further, only when we meet the living God in Christ do we really know what life is. We are not some casual and meaningless product of evolution. Each one of us is willed, each one of us is loved, and each one of us is necessary. These are the words of Pope Benedict XVI. So we see the thread of evidence weaving its way through the Gospels, through the wisdom of the Church, and of the very presence of God himself in every conceived person. The author of life, the very presence of God himself, is mysteriously and wonderfully present in every single one of us. What an awesome and even fearful responsibility we have to nurture, love, and protect each other, most especially the most vulnerable in our society. Yet, instead of a loving, respectful society, we find ourselves and our loved ones immersed in a very grave, very destructive culture of death. We are concerned and shocked at what our children and grandchildren are exposed to. New social norms, terms of verbal reference and behaviours have taken our natural family life to such depraved levels that we could never, ever even have thought of 20 years ago. We're bombarded with anti-life, anti-family propaganda on a daily basis. There is so much abortion, so much after-birth abortion now is being promoted, which is, as we know, infanticide. Abortifacients and contraception against life materials are being used on a daily basis. The sexualisation of our young children, sexting overtaking the usual texting of young people on their cell phones. So much pornography. Euthanasia is a real threat. It is happening here now in Auckland. This is assisted suicide. And another threat is stem cell research. We're given to understand that adult stem cells are used to and can be used to heal some conditions, but you must be very, very mindful and careful that oftentimes the reference to adult stem cells actually refers to the more mature unborn fetal cells as opposed to embryonic fetal cells. And so it's such a huge threat to us. We must know the enemy. We must know what we are dealing with. But FLI provides the foot soldiers of love and life in this great war on humanity and on God himself. Every person engaged in praying and practical pro-life work, helping in whatever capacity they can, communicating the love approach of life in the workplace, taking care of vulnerable pregnant women, counselling, loving and healing post-abortive women. We're all soldiers of love and life. So thank you for every single person in this room who is involved in any way whatsoever in the nurture and protection of life, faith and family. Together, we all work in the front lines, and we are making huge progress. And with the grace of God, in his own time, we will overthrow the anti-lifers, and that is a certainty. It is most certainly a real certainty. It is happening, because at the same time as we witness unprecedented numbers of attacks on life, faith and family, we are also witnessing an unprecedented number of young people rising up in the pro-life community who are taking responsibility and acting in the most positive ways to preach the gospel of life. And in the United States, we are seeing countless numbers of people, of professionals who have been involved in abortion, in the abortion industry, who are laying down their tools of trade, and they are turning to God. They are becoming Christians, and more often than not, they are then becoming Catholics. We also now see that over many, many years, there have been around 2,000 Planned Parenthood facilities providing abortions in the United States. And in the last few years, that number has dropped to less than 700. So great things are happening. We are on the winning side because we are a Eucharistic people. We are a people of hope, and we are determined to stay in the fight till our last breath. We do have to remember, though, that it is God's fight. It is his battle, and he has already won by his death on the cross. And so we have to remember always the words of Blessed Mother Teresa, just in case that we forget that it is God's battle and it's not our own personal thing. The Blessed Mother Teresa told us that we must be faithful. We do not have to be successful, but we must be faithful. We must see this then as a lifetime commitment to promote the gospel of life, and always remember that at the very heart and soul of this work is the gospel of life, God himself. This weekend we are celebrating our Eucharistic life, that which is of Jesus himself. We cannot separate this gift of life to every conceived person. We can't separate it from our home life, our work life, or our spiritual life. The Eucharist, the culture of life, our Marian devotion, is intrinsically linked, and it is inseparable. And so, in true Eucharistic celebration and deep love for Mother Mary, I would like to share with you some of the stories of love and great hope from our John Paul II Centre of Life here in Auckland. And I think, oh, that's good. No? It is. As I have been speaking with you over these last minutes, I think, good, some images have been appearing on the screen of some of our mums, some of our stories, some of our wonderful things that happen for mothers here in Auckland. So I'm going to tell you a few stories. On February the 5th this year, we enjoyed our second annual Family Fun Day, and we counted, interestingly enough, about 700 people had come on that day, and this family arrived, and they were so proud to come. They had seen the notice in their local church bulletin here on the North Shore, and they decided they were going to come and introduce their 9-year-old daughter to us, and I think to Bishop Pat. Their daughter was adopted, and they wanted to tell us how happy they were as a family and how proud they are of their young lady. And I remembered the birth of this little girl so very, very well. I was present at her birth. Her birth mum had been coming into our centre for many, many months, actually. And I had introduced her to our midwife, Mary Seong, and another midwife, Mary, who was working with Mary Seong, all Marys. Mum had concealed her pregnancy for reasons known only to herself and to Almighty God, and we honoured that. She felt that she needed to adopt this little child to a loving family, and that this child be given the opportunity to have a mother and a father and everything in life that she would never be able to provide and could never reveal to her family. I had the great privilege of giving this tiny baby girl her first feed, of loving her and cuddling her, and within 1 hour of her birth, taking her home to my family, where my darling husband Terry and our children took care of this little girl for 12 days until she could legally go home with her new adoptive parents. And for them to come to our Family Fun Day and to want to be involved was a real blessing and a real joy. And I want to thank those of you who are here this evening and who I see in the audience who may know this family but have made it possible for us to save the life of that little girl and for her to be adopted into such a wonderful family. There was another little adoption story, or would-be adoption story as well. A very young girl came into our centre, and she too was concealing her pregnancy. She had felt very much that as she had got herself into this mess, she must be the one to get herself out of the mess, and she could not garner up the courage to go to her family and speak to her parents about her predicament. She was a lovely girl, and I could tell that every time we met that she had a wonderful family who would love her and support her and do everything they could for her and her baby. But she just could not bring herself to speak with her mum. Even though every morning when Dad got up and went to work, she would hop into bed with her mum and they would have a cup of tea together before she went off to Unitec for the day and before her mother went off at 7 a.m. to go to her daily work. It's hard to imagine, it's hard to believe that a mother could not know that her own child was having a baby. But this young girl managed to conceal her pregnancy very well. I prayed a lot over those months, and every time I saw this young lady, I pleaded with her to go and visit her parents myself, or we looked at and explored different ways in which she could actually garner up the courage to talk to her family, and she just couldn't. And so we started looking at adoption files and possibilities. But of course, there were no prospective adoptive families that she felt happy with. The day came for her to have her baby, and it was a bittersweet event because she called me, and I went up and met Mary, our midwife, at the hospital, and I was present at the birth of this child also, and I fed him. I gave him his first feed, and I named him Samuel, while his mum turned her head away and pretended that this nightmare or something magical would happen to make this nightmare go away. It was a joyful occasion to see this little child born, but I was deeply saddened. I felt that I had robbed grandparents of their right, of their duty and responsibility to be there for their child and for their first grandchild. As it happened, the baby wasn't very well and he was underweight, and so he needed to stay in hospital, thanks be to God. And so the hospital agreed to take care of the wee baby, and every day this young mum would catch the bus and go back up and spend time with this little baby, Samuel. She would be back home in time before her family arrived, and still they didn't know that she had just given birth to their grandchild, their grandson. On the morning of day 12, 7:30 a.m. in the morning, so I was just getting our children ready for school to put them in the car and take them to their classes. And the telephone rang, and it was this young lady. "Hello, Mrs. Bayer. I've just told my mum and my dad," and they're in shock. Well, they're going to take me up to the hospital now to bring baby Samuel home. And I could have fainted on the floor. It was such wonderful, wonderful news. And Mrs. Bayer, you know all those baby things you talked about. Can you bring them up to the hospital, like now? So, yeah, I got my running boots on and, of course, loaded up the car with the children, dropped them off and raced up to the hospital and had a wonderful ending. Sometime later, the whole family came into our centre with this beautiful little baby whom they retained the name of Samuel. They christened him, a wonderful Christian family, and it was a beautiful, beautiful ending. So again, thank you for helping that make that happen. But it did remind me very much of Pope Benedict's words. Even in the most difficult circumstances, human freedom is capable of extraordinary acts of sacrifice and solidarity to welcome the life of a new human being. I know I don't want to keep you too long, and I've probably got about 6 or 7 or 8 stories here, so I won't do that to you. But I would share with you something in our own family. About 6 years ago, we were very, very surprised when a young mother, very young girl, gave birth to a little girl with Down syndrome. Because of the number of anomalies that this little girl had and the difficulties of this young child herself, we were asked and we offered to bring mother and baby into our family to stay for a wee bit because SIFs could not find a placement and birth mother did not want her little girl adopted out. And so they came home to us, and of course many of you will know that little Elizabeth is still very, very much a part of our family. I think her picture may have been shown on the screen this evening. They lived with us for several months, and the young mum found it very difficult to live in a normal family situation. And so as time went by, she had things to do and places to go. And so at our very mature age, Terry and I adopted into our hearts and our family little Elizabeth Therese. As her little story of life unfolded, it became apparent that she was profoundly deaf, as she needed very, very severe open heart surgery. She is at the high end of ADHD, and she also she's in danger of losing her eyesight because the pressure is continuously building up behind her eye sockets, and that's very indicative of childhood glaucoma. She also has different colours in her eyes, which are also indicative of the condition, and those colours are changing, which isn't such a great sign for her. She's a very beautiful child, and she is our little missionary of love, as we like to call her. We also have a son, 21, who has Down syndrome, as many of you know, and both Elizabeth and Benjamin have what we have come to know as the love chromosome. They have an extra chromosome and is known now as the love chromosome, something that you and I can never ever hope to achieve in our life. These children have a tremendous capacity for giving out unconditional love. They can be very mischievous, yes, but never, never any malice in their life. You will never ever hear or see a person with Down syndrome speaking untoward about anybody else. They are the light of our lives, and we have three special children at home who we're very, very proud of. And so I think we understand that every single conceived life is very, very special. And now when we are faced with the maternal screening program that is detecting so many Down syndrome people, of whom 90% of detected unborn children with Down syndrome are being aborted, we have to ask ourselves the question, why? Why is a medical profession, a scientific profession, a legal profession, a political leadership in our country, and as ordinary Joe Bloggs of this world, why in the name of Almighty God would we want these people annihilated? As I said, they love unconditionally. They are very, very close to the very heart of Jesus. They embrace life every day to the fullest. And yet, we as a society are saying it's okay to screen them out of existence. We are denying ourselves of the ability for these people to teach us in our own selfishness, patience, love, understanding, self-giving, self-sacrifice, and every virtue that we can imagine. Why? Why would we do that? I don't understand. There are so many stories that I would like to speak with you this evening. And perhaps, I would talk to you about one more, perhaps, maybe two. A young Catholic girl came to our centre. Her mother had died when she was just 16 years old. She hadn't been brought up in the faith, just baptised as a Catholic. She was very, very lonely and very, very sad. And so she got caught up with a young Muslim gentleman whom she married, and she got pregnant, and she came to us and didn't know what to do. She didn't really want to have the baby, she was quite ambivalent, etc., etc. The long and the short of it is that through coming into the centre very, very regularly, through loving her, befriending her and embracing her life and bringing her through to wholeness, she gave birth to her little baby. But then she found that her Muslim husband was starting to exercise his rights to have more than one wife and to have other children. And so where she has gone to this gentleman for love and family, she has discovered that she can only have little bits and pieces of him. So we love her and protect her, and we are always there for her whenever she wants to come to our centre. And as I speak to you tonight, I am on call. We're waiting for a baby boy to be born, and this little boy has got two adoptive parents anxiously waiting for his birth and have asked me to be there. And I said, well, I can get someone else to be there. You know, it's kind of awkward. Our son's just broken his ankle and he's in a wheelchair, so Dad's at home taking care of him and blah, blah, blah. But they have asked me to be there, so I've made myself available and I will be there for them. And it's very exciting. So I would ask you this evening too to pray for the birth mother, who for her own reasons again feels that she needs to adopt this little boy. Blessed Mother Teresa tells us that when we die, we will come face to face with God, the author of life. Who will give an account to God for the millions and millions of babies who were never allowed the chance to experience loving and being loved and being born? I'd ask you to reflect on that and pray that all of our efforts, all of our collective efforts, all of our young people, everyone internationally that are working for the gospel of life will make those inroads that I spoke about earlier on even more urgent, more passionate, and that we will be a wonderful people of hope, of love and of joy. I'm going to finish now because I know it's very late and, you know, enough's enough. But thank you very, very much. And thank you so much for your support. And a huge, huge thank you to the staff, the volunteers and all the friends of life, of family life. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you.